started. Hi, I'm Anna Marquise, Advocacy and Outreach Director, and welcome to the People's Review Live, hosted by us, the Equality State Policy Center. We're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to improve the lives of all Wyoming's people through transparent government, fair elections, and thriving communities. The People's Review Live is designed to help people across Wyoming engage with our government and keep up with important issues and debates. When we work together, we can ensure transparent government, fair elections, and thriving communities. And that's never been more important than it is right now. This event is made possible thanks to the generous support of the People's Review Live Leadership Circle members, Marcia Kunstill and Joe Albright, Joanne Sky and True, Shane True, Mike Shanzi and Kathy Jenkins, and an anonymous donor. If you'd like to learn how to become a Leadership Circle member, please email me and I'll drop my email in the chat, or you can find it on our website. I'll now pass it off to ESPC's new Executive Director, Jen Lowe, to give us a quick overview of housekeeping and to get us started.
Thank you, Anna. Good evening, and thank you all for joining us tonight. Medicaid expansion is an urgent matter in Wyoming, and it is hopeful to see so many participants here tonight. Before we get started here, just a reminder that we are meeting in a webinar format, so the panelists can see and hear each other while the audience gets to watch and listen. We encourage you to put your questions in the chat throughout the evening as they come up. We will do our best to address them during the discussion. If for some reason you can't see or hear the panelists now, or you have any technical issues during the event, Anna is here to help. Just reach out to her through the chat feature and she will assist you. Now, I'd like to offer a great big thank you to our panelists. It really is a who's who of Medicaid expansion. I know how busy you all are, and it means a lot that you're taking the time to be here tonight. Our panelists tonight include Sara Burlingame. Sara Burlingame is the Executive Director at Wyoming Equality, and in 2019-2020 represented House District 44 in the Wyoming legislature. She has a background in faith organizing that centers on racial and socioeconomic justice. She's on the Board of Arts Cheyenne and a member of the Cheyenne Police Advisory Committee. Sara is a poet and an essayist who writes about intersectionality, queer rural lives like her own, faith, humanism, and the joy of hard conversations. Sara's proud to identify as a scrappy trailer park kid who made good. She lives with her husband, Jason Thomas, and their two darling barbarian children, Atticus and Emerson, in South Cheyenne. Adam Searing is an associate professor of the practice at the Georgetown University McCourt School of Public Policy Center for Children and Families. His primary focus is on Medicaid and other health coverage programs. Before joining the Center for Children and Families, Adam served as Director of Health Access Coalition for the North Carolina Justice Center for 17 years. During his time there, Adam fought to keep health plans and hospitals nonprofit and community focused. He successfully led the charge to expand the state's Medicaid program, and he helped pass a model state's children's health insurance program. In 2012, he was named a Health Advocate of the Year by the national consumer group Families USA. That same year, he was recognized as a champion of change by the White House. Adam is a licensed attorney with degrees in both law and public health from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Chairman Jordan Dresser serves as a leader of the Northern Arapaho Business Council. As a member of the Northern Arapaho tribe, located on the Wind River Indian Reservation in central Wyoming, he has dedicated himself to improving the lives of those around him. He graduated from the University of Wyoming in 2008 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism. He has worked as a reporter for the Lincoln Journal-Star, the Salt Lake Tribune, the Forum, and the Denver Post. Questions of who owns tribal artifacts and the role tribal members play in these decisions prompted Dresser to leave Wind River and enroll in a museum studies program at the University of San Francisco. In 2016, he co-produced the documentary What Was Ours. His latest film, The Art of Home, a Wind River story, aired on PBS station, is available to stream online. He was elected to serve as chairman in December 2020, and I believe is the youngest chairman elected. Jan Cartwright is the executive director of the Wyoming Primary Care Association and has worked with community health centers in Wyoming for almost 12 years at the Wyoming Primary Care Association. She has served as the executive director for the past 6. She describes her move to the WYPCA as the smartest and luckiest event in her career. The best part of her work, according to Jan, is supporting the growth of community health centers in Wyoming and integrating their work to provide quality care for the underserved. This is only possible because of the strong collaborations within the Community Health Center network regionally and nationally, the partnership with Wyoming Office of Rural Health, and with many other safety net and nonprofit allies. Outside of her work, she's a member of the Cheyenne League of Women Voters and has a keen interest in mental health and equity issues. Jan is a native of Casper, Wyoming, and has a BSW from the University of Wyoming Casper College. She has 5 grown children and 3 grandchildren who are all the brightest parts of her life. Now, let's get to the good stuff. I'd like to start with the basics and make sure that we're all sort of speaking the same language. So Jan, I'd like to start with you. Can you briefly explain what Medicaid is, what Medicaid expansion is, what the coverage gap is, and how many Wyomingites fall into the coverage gap?
Thank you, Jen. My pleasure. So the coverage gap is the difference between people who are eligible for traditional Medicaid and people who do not make enough to qualify for insurance on the health marketplace. So in other words, if you're a childless adult in Wyoming, you don't qualify for Medicaid. If you're a family of three in Wyoming making a little over $8,000, you don't qualify. However, if you don't have enough money to purchase the insurance, then you're stuck in the Medicaid gap. Currently, the estimate is that about 7,000 people in Wyoming fall into the coverage gap, which means that they have to seek health care, either primary care to just maintain their health or acute care when somebody in their family gets ill through other means, which sometimes means going to the emergency room where care is very expensive. If they live in a community where there's a community health center, then they can seek care there and pay a certain amount of money based on their income on a sliding fee. However, if they live in a community where there isn't a community health center, then they're just out of luck. I think that answered all your questions.
That was great. Thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure everybody, I'm sure most of you know, but just want to make sure everybody kind of had an idea of what we were discussing tonight. Adam?
May I add one more thing, Jen? I'm sorry. The really important point here is that Medicaid is health insurance. When people are on Medicaid, they have health insurance. The door is open to them to be able to seek care where they need to seek care. So thank you for that chance to add something.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here tonight and for your response. Adam, we've been trying for several years to move Medicaid along in Wyoming with little success. We know that you've had some success in other states. Can you sort of tell us about that experience?
Sure. There are, now 12 states we're down to 12 states who have an expanded coverage, and I have the privilege and sometimes the frustration of working in many of these states and in some that have expanded. And the things that have really made the difference in the states that have expanded, especially the ones that have expanded in recent years, have been first, people in the state and policymakers especially getting to know the stories of people who are in this Medicaid gap who would benefit from the expansion. And often, when you hear when they are able to see the stories, I know you all have worked on this too, and with some success, but that is we found in state after state after state, even though it's frustrating, the cumulative effect of those, of policymakers hearing from their constituents who are in this gap is effective. So that's one thing. The second thing is really which I think you all have done a good job of too, is really bringing together a lot of different interests in the state who can explain the different parts of how expansion will work and the benefits. So the hospitals and other medical providers who would see people who could now pay their bills, the companies who would benefit, in addition to the individuals who would get coverage. There's a whole range of folks who are working in other social service areas. They find that if someone's got coverage, that financially benefits them as well, because like Jan was saying, this is insurance, and part of the job of insurance is not just to let you go see the doctor when you're sick, but it's also to protect you from unexpected bills, whether it's a fire at your house or whether you get, in a nasty accident and you need $300,000 worth of care at the hospital. And so if you're financially able to be more secure, then you're able to be more part of the community and pay your bills. So when you bring all those different interests together, that's helpful too. And I think those are the two main things that we see.
Thank you so much, Adam. So Healthy Wyoming and ESPC have been planning a series of vigils that will take place tomorrow night. These vigils are in honor of those that have died or have had other health issues due to a lack of healthcare access. Sara, I'm hoping that you kind of would talk to us a little bit about these vigils, what they represent, how people can get involved, where they're taking place.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And thanks everybody that I'm on the panel with. I'm excited to be with such a good, diverse crew. The vigils are taking place all around the state. I can rattle off, I think we've got one in Pinedale. I think there will be one not tomorrow, but at a later date in Jackson. We've got them in Rock Springs, Cheyenne, Laramie, I believe Gillette, and Casper. So all throughout the state, you shouldn't be more than an hour away from one if you'd like to attend one. And I'll just say a little bit about like the organizing of them has been a really fun, really enjoyable kind of experience. We have Healthy Wyoming has a statewide organizer, Rebecca Berry, who brings a lot of knowledge and experience to this. And she's been organizing. She's from Arkansas originally, and she's just done a lot of really good grassroots. And it's always funny to me how people move to Wyoming and will like know more about our state than we do. Like she'll mention things that come up at little meetings, that she's had in Gillette or that she's had in Sheridan. Oh, Sheridan, sorry, that's the one I forgot. Sheridan is having a vigil as well. And I mentioned her specifically just because it's nice to give credit to the people who are doing all this hard work, but also just to talk a little bit about capacity, that it's been amazing having state and national partners in this and feeling like we're not alone. Sometimes in Wyoming, I feel like we're just all alone and it's the same dozen people who are trying to like pull the moon back into orbit. And this has felt really nice that like there's some funding. We can afford to hire someone who can, drive her little Subaru over to Pinedale and over to Sheridan. So Rebecca's doing really nice work for us. We've got Marcy Kendred, one of my good friends here in Cheyenne, who's been working on just how we tell our stories and getting people who are never really going to look at the data. They're never going to look at like the hard numbers about the money that our state is losing, but there are neighbors, there are friends, there are, the people that we go to church with. And when they understand that this impacts us personally and they hear a story that connects all those numbers with the actual people, but that's our job, right? And that's what Marcy's job has been, is to get folks to show up at these vigils and to share those stories. And I think the thing that's been the most moving to me is how vulnerable people are allowing themselves to be. I mean, these are vigils, right? Like this is not a demonstration. It's not a march. It's not a, direct action. It's a vigil. And, they're candlelight. We're lighting a candle and it has this deep spiritual and humanistic significance, right? Like we light candles against the dark. And if you've lost someone and thought the only thing that stood between me having that person in my life and then being here is money, like it's such a darkness, right? It feels like there's not enough love, there's not enough support in our community. And, the only thing we know how to do is to come together and to light those candles in the dark, to stand up with each other, to sing some hymns. We've got some really amazing faith leaders from around the state. Father Bill Hill and Pastor Bernadine Kraft in Rock Springs, Father Rob Spalding, and I'm blanking on the name of the Episcopal minister in Laramie. Lots of really great faith leaders who are stepping forward, are saying prayers, and leading folks in a conversation to say, this is also a moral question. It's an economic question for sure, with a pretty easy $ answer, but it's also a moral question. And if you call yourself someone who is invested in a moral life, then we hope that you'll turn out at these vigils. We hope that someone will tell a story that speaks to you. And we hope if you're struggling and feeling like there's not enough people to carry this work in Wyoming, that you'll come to one of these vigils and feel supported and see that like Healthy Wyoming has just done an amazing job bringing all kinds of folks together who may not agree on anything else, but we agree that you should not lose your life. You should not lose your dignity and your humanity because you don't have enough money. And we all deserve access to healthcare. So those are the vigils. And thanks for the great question, Jen.
Absolutely. So if you're attending this panel tonight and you're interested in learning about where there's a vigil near you, Anna has put a link in the chat that will show you where those vigils are happening and how to get yourself involved. So my next question is for Chairman Dresser. Chairman Dresser, how can expanding Medicaid increase access to healthcare for historically marginalized communities in Wyoming?
Thank you for having me this evening. I think providing that would help us not only show that, the country has an obligation in a country to supply healthcare. And we relied on the historically underfunded IHS, which hasn't worked out for us, but tribes have taken it upon themselves, including ourselves, to kind of become independent of IHS and create their own clinics. We've done that with the Wind River Cares. And with us, it would help us match the funds in a sense. And would help us be able to do those different things and help to provide healthcare that's not really, that's not reactive. Our people deal with historically high diabetes and other health line conditions. So that would help us push more money into being preventative with everything. And that's a key thing for us that we really need to stay on top of. It's Medicaid expansion is something that we're very passionate about, and it would just provide so many opportunities for us. Right now, like the rest of the world, we're battling COVID, and Wind River has been hit very hard from that. Some of the earliest deaths here in Wyoming occurred on the Wind River Reservation. We've had rates in the last few weeks have been in the hundreds going up. Positivity rates are going up in a lot of different places. And so I think that we don't know what's going to come next in terms of the people who do survive COVID. What's going to happen to them after that? What kind of health conditions are they going to have? So I think that's going to be able to help our people be able to have more options than IHS, which we can't rely on, and they've been very limited on their funding and the different opportunities that they have. So it would be able to provide truly healthcare for us, and also I think fulfill a lot of the government promises that we desperately need and that were promised to us through our treaty rights.
Thank you, Chairman Dresser. So Jan, I'm going to come back to you. In your clinics, you see several people who fall into the coverage gap. Can you tell us what that looks like? Who are those folks and what it means practically for them?
Well, I think that there's a twofold story to tell here, Jan, and thank you for that question. I also want to acknowledge, as Sara said, how wonderful it is to be on this panel. I'm a big admirer of Chairman Dresser's work, and so this was an exciting time for me. And the panel is super, and I thank Equality State Policy Center for hosting us. The twofold part of the story is the impact on the people themselves and then the impact on the institution. So people who fall into the coverage gap, first of all, have to know that there's a community health center available to help them. In some cases, they may have to travel to get to a health center. They have to bring all of their paperwork to qualify them for the sliding fee scale, as I said before. And so there's a lot of things that they have to do just to get in the door and access that care. Once they do access care, they're getting primary care. And then the goal would be to give them as much care while they're in the health center as possible. So some health centers have dental programs, mental health programs, and on and on. However, if there's someone, as Chairman Dresser mentioned, who has diabetes and really needs to see a specialist, now things get much more difficult for them, because if they have to be sent outside the health center, are they going to be able to afford the care that they need from the specialist? And so it really gets very difficult in that regard. The impact on the organization is that several of our health centers see between 50% and 70% uninsured people, which means that those people are paying the sliding fee, which can range anywhere from $5 to $20 if they qualify. And they get federal funding, the health centers get federal funding, but it's only to offset a certain portion of that. So when they're writing off an awful lot of cost of care, it has a very negative impact on the health center itself as well. And if I could make just one more quick comment. So the one thing that's really working in Wyoming is the health insurance marketplace. And so each year, about 25,000 people access health insurance because they're above 100% of FPL, or federal poverty level. Remember that the poverty level is set every year. And so they can purchase insurance. Also remember that health insurance in Wyoming is the most expensive in the country. So it's not as if, we're talking about just a few dollars. We're talking about significant cost. And of those 25,000 people who can access health insurance on the marketplace, about 90% of them qualify for subsidies. So I would argue that if we turn our lens to the people who we're fighting for to get Medicaid expansion, it's really the same thing. We're asking these folks to be able to qualify for health insurance with subsidies. It just happens to be called something different. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to put this question out to the panelists in general. Jan, you touched on something that I think is quite interesting. Wyoming is a low population state. We're a rural state. Why is our insurance the most expensive in the country?
Oh, well, I'll take the first hit at that. I think we all know, because we work in this all the time, a health insurance plan is only as good as its pool. So if you have a pool of only 600,000 people to spread across all of the costs, that's a whole different animal than it is if you live in New York State, where there's a great deal of people to spread the cost across. So I think that's the biggest reason. I'm sure there's many more.
I would like to aim my next question then at Adam. What have expansion states found out about racial equity and health justice with Medicaid expansion?
I'd be happy to address that. And do you want me to talk about maternal mortality, or you want to cover that in a later question too?
If you want to incorporate that into the answer, that's fine. And then I'd love to have Sara or any other panelists jump in on that question as well.
All right. Well, I won't try and do any sort of thesis on this. I think it's pretty simple. The more folks who get coverage, the better care we're giving to everyone. And we know from really decades of research that when we expand Medicaid, we are starting to chip away at some of these gaps that divide the healthcare we deliver and the health that people experience, but that are different because of race and ethnicity. I think we see this in lots of different areas of healthcare. One of them is maternal health and maternal mortality, where you know, when we know when we have an expansion state where more women of childbearing age are able to access care before, during, and after pregnancy, this means that not only does the uninsured rate go down by about twice, by about half, but the mixing my digits up there, but that we also you also have you start to address that gap where we have more women who are of different races experiencing more adverse events, both for their health and, you know, eventually mortality, death. And that's the same is true for kids, but we have much lower rates of infant mortality, and that difference is exacerbated by race. And once we expand Medicaid, we see those differences really start to come down. It's not perfect. There's lots of other things we need to do. But it is like a key factor in making sure that we don't have this health system which treats people differently based on their race or their ethnicity. There's plenty more to say there, but that's the basic overview.
Well, I'd like to continue that conversation about maternal health and access to healthcare as a pregnant woman. We have seen recent research that Medicaid leads to healthier pregnancies, fewer postpartum complications, and better health for babies as well. Would any of the panelists like to talk about the outcomes for moms and babies with Medicaid expansion?
I can add a few things because some folks are in our shop just released a paper which you guys helped us with, and I'm sure other people have much more to say as well. But one of these striking outcomes when states expand Medicaid, infant mortality goes down by about 50%, which is just amazing. That just means that we're saving babies by expanding Medicaid. It's just fantastic. And we know that when you expand Medicaid, moms who are covered by Medicaid, their babies have healthier weights, better access to care, just are generally healthier. So are going to have a better start in life. So that's just amazing to me. Reducing the number of women who are uninsured. Wyoming is unfortunately right at the bottom of the efforts to do that. You've not really moved at all since 2013 in the number of women who are uninsured in the state, trying to reduce that. And it has so many other benefits, like I was talking about earlier. Families and moms who get insurance, they have in non-expansion states, they have much higher medical debt than in states that have expanded. And medical debt is one of the primary, if not the primary, cause of bankruptcy. So, it has ripple effects through the system. I think that we have an embarrassment in our country, and that embarrassment is that of all the wealthy industrialized countries, we have the highest maternal mortality rate of any industrialized country, and that is just a complete embarrassment. And that like we were talking about, that maternal mortality rate is hugely different depending on your race. If you are Black or brown, or depending on your ethnicity, it can be 2, 3, 4 times higher than if you're white, and it's not good even if you are white. It is an outrage. And so Medicaid expansion is something that we can use to start to address these issues. And I'm sure there are others who have much more to say about this.
Jan, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that this is another part of the Medicaid work that we want to be doing, simply because in the ARP, it allowed moms to stay on Medicaid beyond the 6 weeks after their baby. So it allows them to stay on Medicaid for a year. And because of the public health emergency that came because of COVID, we already have women who have been on Medicaid for a year after they had their babies. And there's quite a bit of compelling information about the kind of care that they sought. And primarily it was around mental health and substance use disorder. And so I think that if they can get the help they need and continue to raise their baby in a healthy atmosphere, that's a win for everyone. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can accomplish as well, going through the next legislative session, but it's an important facet as well, going back to all the data that Adam just shared.
I'm happy to hop on this one if we've got a minute. One of the largest groups that we anticipate enrolling if we expand Medicaid are working women under the age of 35. And we have a lot of conversations in Wyoming about this disparity between what we all say and feel in our hearts to be true, right? Which is that we're the equality state. We didn't, even our language, the way we say, other states say, oh, you know, eventually they got around to granting women the right to vote. And in Wyoming, we're pretty specific. We say we didn't grant women the right to vote. We were the first state to acknowledge women's inherent right to vote. That we have like this pride in our striving and our history of working for gender equality. And then we have these, you know, pardon me, these bullshit, you know, statistics that tell us we're not doing it. Like, there's the story that we tell about ourselves. There's how we want to feel about, you know, the truth of it. And then there's what we actually do. And if working women in Wyoming can't go to the doctor, then we're failing them. If we're failing them as neighbors, we're failing them as colleagues, we're failing them as legislators, we're failing them. If you're working in Wyoming, you are putting money into the tax base so that we can, you know, build schools and roads and do everything else, but you can't go to the doctor. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. And we, you know, we see it in other arenas, right? Like, we know that we're always toggling around in the bottom three for the wage gap disparity, right? Like, if you're a woman in Wyoming, if you're a white woman, you're going to be making significantly less than your male counterparts. If you're a Hispanic woman, you're going to be making even less than that. If you're a Black woman, you're going to be making even less than that. And so we have these gaps between the thing that we always say about ourselves and that's aspirational, right? That like, we're a live and let live state. And here in Wyoming, we're proud of our heritage of equality, but we don't always put the hard work into it. And to me, the promise of expanding Medicaid is saying that the story that we tell about ourselves, we'll be able to say that we put some meat on the bones. We'll be able to say, like, we actually did something to make it true. Because if we just tell the story about what we did, you know, 150 years ago, but we don't show up to make sure that working women in Wyoming can go and see a doctor when they need to, then we're not really the equality state. That's my sort of cold-blooded take on that question. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you all. Chairman Dresser, would you like to jump in this conversation and maybe mention how you think expanding Medicaid could help some of the mothers, children, and women on the reservation?
I think that it would level the playing field that they already are coming into with the deficit. I think that as Native women, you know, our women are considered one of our most sacred, and also their children are considered our most sacred, and also our elders, you know, and Medicaid would impact a lot of those individuals the best, you know, and it would help provide services that we need, not only for them to be healthy, but for our tribe to be healthy as a whole, and for them to continue on this generation that we have. The bulk of our population is under the age of 21. So we have a young generation coming up, and a lot of them are young women. So we need a generation that's going to be healthy to not only carry on our people, but also to be there for everybody.
Thank you. So I think we've got a good idea of what we're talking about with Medicaid expansion. And now I kind of want to dig into what it's going to look like in Wyoming. You know, I'd love Jan or Sara or even Chairman Dresser to explain how Medicaid expansion aligns with Wyoming values.
Okay, I'll go first. Hopefully not last. I do believe, Jen, that it aligns with our values. It goes back to what Sarah was so eloquently talking about in terms of the fact that we call ourselves the equality state, and yet far too many moms either don't survive their own pregnancy or their child doesn't survive. There's a lot of data available in Wyoming about those terrible incidences, but this is one way that we could turn the tide on that. I think that, you know, we talk about the Code of the West, and the Code of the West is about, you know, taking care of one another, in essence, the way that I read it. And so I believe that it is the right thing to do. I think that it is important. I think it stabilizes the entire system. If everybody had insurance, imagine what our state would look like, how our hospitals would thrive, how our families would thrive. So I believe strongly that Wyoming would be better with Medicaid expansion.
We've had some trouble, right? We're not having a lot of luck in Wyoming moving Medicaid expansion forward. I would love for someone to sort of talk about the successes that we've had last year in the legislature, and also, you know, where Medicaid expansion stands right now in the state.
Well, I'll talk a little bit, you know, I mean, I'm sure that people can provide the historical context, but, you know, like it was mentioned before, I got into office this past fall, you know, well, winter. So I went to testify earlier this year, and it was very enlightening in different ways. You know, you had people from all over the state testify who the bulk of them were women, you know, saying how this was going to benefit them. And when time came, you know, it was just conversations about, well, who's going to take on that cost? Who's going to take on that cost? You know, are we all prepared to do that? And I think as us as tribal nations, it's like, yeah, we are. You know, we're traditionally Native cultures have always been collective cultures, meaning that they take care of each other. You know, and I think Wyoming prides itself as taking care of each other, you know, and in the end, if that means that we have to take on the costs with us individually, then yeah, we'll do that, you know, just to ensure that our grandmas and grandpas, sons, daughters, grandkids have healthcare that's going to ensure they live a quality life. Like, then so be it. But those are things that I think missed a lot of people's heads there, you know, or they just couldn't understand those different concepts of that, you know. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that our lawmakers and the individuals who have those decision makings need to come out and visit the reservation. They need to come out and visit these small towns across Wyoming and get to know the people there and see what's going on, rather than making judgments from their safe place, you know. And that's what it really comes down to, because at the end of the day, it's like we got to have empathy for each other to make positive choices.
So last year, ESPC was part of a coalition that was able to get some legislation passed through the House that would have expanded Medicaid. Unfortunately, that legislation failed in the Senate. Sara, can you talk a little bit about that experience and that process, and maybe, you know, what the future looks like?
Sure. Yeah, I'll tell you what it reminded me of. It reminded me of, oh, what was it? I think it was like 2007, 2008, when there were a lot of bills that were working against marriage, against, you know, same-sex marriage. And, you know, usually it would be like the same group of like 10 or 12 people across the state who are showing up, you know, to the Capitol. And then it was like all of a sudden, it felt very like spontaneous, like folks got organized. And I remember going to my first meeting where they were like, hey, here's a phone tree. Here's folks you're going to call. We need somebody who's going to get a hold of of businesses. We need somebody who's going to get hold of churches, like this low key power mapping. And it just felt so like, oh my goodness, we have organization, we have community. Like, it's not going to be the same 10 folks. I felt that same sensation this last year. I mean, it was a big loss, right? Like, we lost, the battle to get the vote through. But man, did we come so much closer, and did we like so rapidly, it feels like to me, just because things are so slow in Wyoming. We are a pokey people. It did feel like we built a lot of momentum really fast. And to me, like, one of the, how it has power and momentum in it is it's not just the usual suspects. And also it's people who maybe don't agree on other issues. Like, it's people who would never go to the same church, don't belong to the same political parties, probably wouldn't even go to the same barbecue, but we're all in on Medicaid expansion. Like, there is that like lightning strike of urgency around. It's people who've lost people, right? Like, it's people who have like, look, I didn't understand this issue before, and then I lost a brother. I didn't have to lose a brother, like, people for whom this is so real, that they're willing to show up at the legislature. So that was my like general sense of like how the momentum, came on this. I think in those last days, you saw a lot of really weird, pushback too. You saw the Wyoming Liberty Group, give really heated testimony as though expanding Medicaid was a great moral failing, which was felt really, convoluted to me. And then putting up billboards all over Wyoming, right? Saying, these, and particularly attacking, the community that I represent, right? Like the LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, two-spirit, transgender, queer folks, that specifically targeting transgender Wyomingites, in their homes, like in, we have trans folks in Rock Springs, we have trans folks in Gillette, and seeing their healthcare weaponized by this really well-funded, really kind of not a good actor in the state. So I think rather than have that get me down, that was happening. I mean, I'm sorry that trans people had to see that. But it also makes me feel very strongly that, like, you're winning, that your momentum is building, and that you're really close to getting that critical mass of legislators to vote yes on this when they start putting up billboards against you all over the state. Like, yeah, they know that we're really close, and I appreciate that they know, because we know too.
Thanks for that, Sarah. Adam, you've had success in getting Medicaid expansion in traditionally conservative states. I know you kind of talked about the stories and getting people engaged, but can you dig a little deeper and, maybe give us some sage advice on how to make that happen here?
Yeah, it is difficult, and we all know that. And I'll tell you a story. When I was still working in Raleigh, doing what you all do in North Carolina, advocating for better health care, and when the Supreme Court decision happened that said, well, Medicaid expansion is optional for states, and I wrote an op-ed for the main state newspaper that said, of course, North Carolina is going to expand Medicaid, so everyone will be healthy and it makes financial sense. And of course it's going to happen. And I still, occasionally some people still go, oh, remember when you wrote that? And now it's been 9 years. So it was a little embarrassing, but that wasn't the case now that I've been working in a bunch of other states. So I just said that I know how hard it is, but what we found is, I think Virginia is probably the closest state for you all. When we had some of these legislators, especially in rural districts, who there were several of them who finally turned the corner. And I think you all, had some of this happen when you got closer last time, that was really important because they were, they were some of the leaders, but not the leadership in the legislature, but they made this a key issue. They felt the heat from their constituents that people were going to be voting on this. There was also some of them who converted, felt it was a moral issue. So I think that was a very important thing. The other thing, which you all did very well last time too, when you got so close, was to remember that even when you ask very, very conservative people about this, if they're not, in the legislature, they're often going to support expansion. And I cannot tell you, we do all these focus groups and stuff over the years and polling and meeting people. And you can sit around with a bunch of folks who identify as Republicans and fairly conservative Republicans, and you talk to them for 20 minutes. And in the end, almost all of them invariably will go, that Medicaid sounds like a really good thing to do. It's the cost is minimal. We're really helping people who are working in jobs like food service and stuff. And so I think keeping that in mind, that this is a popular program. Sometimes it feels like, because you get so much pushback from the ideological side of things, especially folks who are in office. But like Chairman Dresser was saying, like having people come out when they actually see what's happening, it really makes a difference. So that's the second thing. I think we talked about the stories are really important. I won't go into that. Sometimes if you can, it seems dumb, and I think it's sort of before you do these other things, but there is this element of just pushing when you have some of these smaller local governments. I know you've done some of this too, who vote to say we think the state should expand. And so some states have had a lot of success with that, like we have towns and cities, and I think you all have done some of that already. But it's sort of drip, drip, drip. Each one is, you get a vote in this little town and they think, or county, and they're like, well, yeah, we think you should expand, but it adds up eventually. So I think that's helpful too. So those are some of the strategies that some of the other states have used.
I want to stick on something that you said, and also something that Chairman Dresser mentioned in his comments, is the sort of kind of question between the cost of expanding Medicaid, financially and humanely. How do we translate that, and how do we convince folks that are convinced that spending more money is not a great thing? How do we translate that into the human story? Jan, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Jen. I think that let me answer a different question. I'll come back to that. Yes, it costs money. It costs the state money, although right now with this additional offer that the federal government is making for 2 years, in the budget crisis that we're in, dollars are dollars. And so that helps fill some gaps. It helps cover the cost of expansion and gives the state more money to do other things. Now that obviously is short-term money, but it does give us a ramp up to provide that health care. And unfortunately, a lot of the work that we do at the policy level takes the long view on things, because if we were able to take a longer view beyond just a biennium, which is how we do our budget in Wyoming, we could see that bringing down hospital costs and bringing down insurance costs and bringing down primary care costs and bringing down drug costs would benefit everyone. And so I think that is more the institutional answer to it. The state obviously does not have a lot of money to play with, but this incentive would let us ramp up and then move forward that way. I think at the personal level, going back to something that Adam had said, people going into bankruptcy because they have medical bills is a tragedy. We have, there are people in Wyoming who do work in the lower echelon. We've had some studies before that we've shared with legislators about who those folks are. And the ironic thing is that when legislators used to come to Cheyenne, we're not doing that right now, but they were interfacing with an awful lot of people who would have qualified for Medicaid. They're the people who kept their rooms clean when they were in hotels, and the people who served them dinner after a long day in the legislature. So, you know, they see them, they're right there in plain sight. But the biggest problem that I think we have beyond the dollar and cents, that, and cents, I mean, it makes sense, but is that there's a terrible, terrible misunderstanding that people who qualify for Medicaid are not working, and that just is not true. So, you know, if we could ever overcome that hurdle, I think that it would get us to that place where Sara wants us to be.
Yeah, and you do that with the, like you said, with bringing those food service workers and folks who work in the hotel and who are selling the, you know, use stuff in the convenience store to in front of them. So that you were just so right. I mean, can I comment just for a sec on the money thing? You know, this is the perennial objection where it's going to cost the state money. We don't have it. We don't know what, but the funniest thing is that once you turn the key, you get legislators to be thinking, okay, we want to do this. Suddenly it's like magic. The money problems go away. They're what money problems? And we saw this. I mean, the best example was this in Oklahoma before they were playing with doing an expansion. Do you remember this? Before they passed their expansion through the ballot initiative, and the legislators put together a Medicaid expansion plan, and the governor was going to sign it. And the idea was to head off the vote on the Medicaid expansion on the ballot. We do this in the ballot, and it was fully financed for years. And they did it within, they came up with this plan like within like a month or two or something like that. And the governor was ready to sign. The only reason it didn't pass was the governor changed his mind at the last minute and thought politically he would win on the expansion, and he didn't. But the lesson there was that, you know, when they wanted to do it, it was, the financing was no problem. And they had been swearing up and down there was no way the state could ever afford to do this. Same thing in Virginia. Oh, he heard for years, you know, oh, it'll bankrupt the state. It's just terrible. When the votes were there, suddenly the plan came together, and there was like, oh, it's, you know, really not a problem. And you know, I mean, you can pull the numbers, and there's tons of data showing that the effect on state budgets is minimal, or even without these extra federal incentives, which are huge, you know, but it really is just, I think for a lot of folks, just seeing it as the political argument that it is, and that if the politics change, then it goes away. Because to me, that's the biggest, you know, I don't know how helpful that is, but it's sort of, because I know it gets thrown in your face all the time. But maybe we should put something together where we pull all those quotes from the legislators in Virginia and Oklahoma.
Well, Adam, you touched on something that I've been thinking about quite a bit. A couple of our neighboring states actually expanded Medicaid through a ballot initiative. So I'm curious about what the panelists think the legislative path forward is for the state of Wyoming. Is it a ballot initiative? Is it some type of law that we propose? Of course, you know, this year being a budget year, a little bit tougher, but looking ahead, what would you see as the best path forward in Wyoming? Sara, I know you have a good answer for this one.
Whatever works. I think despite some huge losses recently in the legislature, I think it's my nature to feel optimistic. Not out of, you know, just good intentions and feelings, but just because we did come so very close this last time. And because I think that there were a couple of moving parts that have only gotten stronger in our favor, where, you know, some folks who had hesitancy or folks who maybe felt like as legislators, they could be on board, but felt like their constituents weren't, and that we've had that time to really have those conversations and say like, hey, if you're in support of this, you're going to have to speak out, like you're going to need to let your legislators know, because they're afraid to vote for it because they only hear from the naysayers. I think those are the things that make me feel like, I think we can win. I think we can win this year. But if we don't, 100% a ballot initiative. Folks who are not from Wyoming look at Wyoming and say, I don't understand. Why aren't you doing everything by ballot initiative? Just because of the cost, right? Like in other states, the cost to do something statewide is so prohibitively expensive. And there just aren't that many of us, you can just swing a stick and whack most of us and get a pretty good, record of how many signatures you need. So we know that the momentum is there. We know that we have a large majority of people who want it. And we feel like we have pretty good organizational power right now. So I'm really optimistic about making it through in the legislature. But if some of those pieces shift and, if some of the really, what is a gentle word to use for them? Extremist, right? If some of the really extremist groups feel like they get more power, then I think we'll lose some of our supporters, right? That they'll feel like, the mob is at the gate and I can't, even though it helps my constituents. And in which case we pivot to ballot initiative, which I think would be a shame. And I think I would feel that like our legislature had let us down, but by hook or by crook.
Thanks, Sarah. Chairman Dresser, I want to come back to you. How do you suggest the average person gets involved? How can, someone who's interested in expanding Medicaid that lives in Wyoming, be it on the reservation or be it in the general public, do something, in your opinion?
The key thing I tell everybody is that, which I always tell our tribal members who want to talk to us about different issues or things that's going on, I'm like, well, use your voice and get involved. The supreme governing body of the Northern Arapaho tribe isn't the Northern Arapaho Business Council, it's the people. And we go off their directives and what they want for us. So if we go out in droves and say, this is what we want, this is what your people of Wyoming want, those who make those decisions have to listen to us. They represent us. And they can't just be sitting. I think in politics, how it works is that you view it from your view of what you think is best. And when at the same time, the human experience is very complex with different voices and different experiences. And that's where the power of empathy comes in, and being able to listen to everybody and say, okay, this is what's going to help us as a whole move forward and be a healthy community that strives to help one another, help each other. But also it's one that's going to build. I think for Medicaid expansion, great things can build here in Wyoming, which will show how we're going to take care of each other in a sense, where oil and gas is collapsing, all these different things where we have to get creative with different things. I think this would be a model that's going to help show that and how it's going to benefit us all. So my thing with everybody is keep using your voices and make sure that everybody hears what you have to say and the experience that you have.
So panelists, we are getting close to the time where this conversation is going to have to end, but I'd like each of you to take about 30 seconds and just kind of share what you would like to see happen next. Adam, I'll start with you.
All right, I think I second what everyone has said about getting folks involved and telling their stories and being active. I mean, that's the way it's happened ultimately in every state. It hasn't been the folks at the top moving it. It's been people who have their lived experiences making it clear what's happened. And so I hope that we can do more of that and make it happen for you all too.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks for joining us tonight. Jan, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to go with what Chairman Dresser said. I think he perfectly brought us all to a point of the fact that it is the people who need to speak up, And it is a worthwhile effort. I hope through the vigils tomorrow night and ongoing through the first of the year, we can build that momentum and continue to work positively with legislators and move this issue forward.
Thank you, Jan. Sarah, you're up.
Thanks so much. Thanks to Jen. Thanks for my amazing co-panelists. This was lovely. I would get together with you guys every Thursday. I hope that folks who've had a really long last 18 months have the opportunity to come to these vigils. You know, they're 100% outdoors, all of them. We're encouraging masks and social distancing. And I hope you have the opportunity to just stand next to some of your neighbors that you know and folks that you don't know and maybe didn't expect to see there, and get the relief and the fellowship of knowing that you don't have to do this alone. You got a lot of people who are supporting you and are doing this together. And particularly if you've suffered losses, if you've lost someone in your family or someone who won't enjoy the same quality of health that they should because we failed to expand Medicaid, that you'll feel like it's an opportunity to be heard, and that you'll feel like it matters to us, because it does matter to us. We think that Wyoming is the best place on earth, and the people here are the best people, and getting to show up for each other is such an honor. So I look forward to seeing folks tomorrow and hearing how they went all over the state.
Thanks, Sarah. Chairman Dressel, we'll close out with you.
My thing is ultimately a very difficult time right now, with not only the Medicaid, but also with the pandemic that's going on right now with virus and now. So I think we as a people have a great power and responsibility to curb this virus. What is that going to do? It's going to be coming together, voices for it. That's going to be the benefit of everyone. It's going to save lives, and that's what it expands to do. And we all got to be smart, and we all got to do our research with different things. But ultimately, it's about taking care of ourselves, you and each other.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'd like to extend a special thanks to my team, Jen Simon and Anna Marquez. You guys have made this just so much easier and really made it possible. So with that, Anna has a couple of comments to close out. Thank you, panelists, for participating tonight. Thank you, attendees, for showing up, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for joining us for the People's Review Live. Once again, ESPC is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and that means that we rely on charitable gifts to fund all of our work. Donations can be made on the web at equalitystate.org, or you can mail a check to 419 South 5th Street, Laramie, Wyoming, 82070. Again, you can send me an email if you want to join our Leadership Circle donors, Marcia Kunstill and Joe Albright, Mike Shanzi and Kathy Jenkins, Joanne, Skyam True and Shane True, and an anonymous donor. Our thanks to them for making tonight possible. And don't forget to join us tomorrow for statewide vigils that will honor our Wyoming neighbors who die each year and who are suffering because they still lack healthcare access. You can learn more by clicking a bunch of the links, which I'm gonna right there. You can also read a news article. And once again, thanks so much for joining us tonight at the People's Review Live, and we'll see you at the next one where we'll be tackling more great topics. Have a great evening.